The Cartoonerific podcast is sponsored by the wonderful World of Animation Gallery, home of rare and wonderful fine animation art. Visit their website at wwagallery.com. And for our Cartoonerific listeners, you will receive a special 10% discount off any purchase if you purchase by March 25th, 2024. Just go to wwagallery.com and enter code CARTOON10 for your 10% discount. Once again, this discount is only valid until midnight, March 25th, 2024. Once again, visit wwagallery.com.
The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific, yeah! It's Cartoonerific, Cartoonerific, it's Cartoonerific, with your host Brian Mitchell.
Well, welcome to the Cartoonerific podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, and I am your host. You know, when I first started doing these podcasts, I mean, we're going back 46 episodes. I had a whole idea of how I was going to do them. And I was going to create an outline. I was going to hit bullet points that I wanted to hit on these interviews. I was going to make it a very regimented podcast. And what I quickly learned was that when you're doing these podcasts, something can throw you off, and it could be as simple as asking a question like, have you ever heard of, and it could be anything. And it could throw the podcast really off into a tangent. It's not a bad thing. It really is not a bad thing, because sometimes you have to let the podcast, you need to let the interview go where it needs to go. And so what you have in your head and what you want isn't necessarily what you end up with, but somehow through the course of doing the interview, you kind of rein it back in and it becomes the interview that you ultimately want, because you want an interview that is interesting. You want a slice of life in there. You want all that information about the person's career and all that, but you want to know about all the other stuff too. You want to know about the behind the scenes stuff and all that. And sometimes you can't get that through a regimented list of bullet points. And so like I said, I quickly learned that. In last week's episode with John Celestri, normally we cover a couple of different things. Normally we go and we cover the person's background, where they lived, their influences and all that. And then you get into their education and a little bit of their career. And then, normally it takes up more than one episode, and then we cut it there and then we come back next week. Well, last week it was pretty much all about where John grew up and his influences. And it was still very, very interesting interview, because we went off on little tangents. We were talking about the WOR TV in New York with the $1 Million Movie, which just, brought back memories for me. But we were talking about the movies that they played the whole week, which was a James Cagney movie or Starin Rogers and stuff like that. So it was very, very interesting to me, and I hope it was to you as well. But anyway, this week we're actually going to be delving into John's education and his first job in the business, which was in New York, and then where he went to after that. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you stay tuned and listen. We'll join John with that interview right after this.
The Cartoonerific podcast is now available on Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Alexa, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, Player FM, Apple Podcasts, and many, many others. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. A new Cartoonerific podcast is uploaded every Friday. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
Well, what can I say? Here's part 2 of our interview with animator John Celestri. Sit back and relax and enjoy. Pretty amazing, right? I know we're all over the place. It's like we haven't even touched on your career. We're just talking about this stuff and we're going off on these tangents. But it's but that's good. But no, it's all good. It's all good.
But it's a great thing to understand what I'm coming to you with.
Right.
Because that's, what we're talking about is history. And it's not like I worked here and then I worked there. It's like this is what formulates an artist.
Yeah.
This is the background.
Well, this is where you get your juice from. This is where you get your energy juice from, because you're so inspired by all the stuff that came before you, and you're raring to kind of show what you can do,
Right. And that's it. And you also have to live through that.
Right.
And the only way you do that is by walking up and down, Manhattan streets from studio to studio, schlepping your portfolio and your reel, and trying to get Phil Kimmelman to say, "Well, can I get a scene? Will you try me out?" I did that for a year and a half, going from one studio to another, and no one would give me a shot.
Yeah, that's the way it was in New York. Yeah.
And no one would give you a shot, and the only way I got it was after a year and a half of doing that. But I also was looking through my reels, my reel to reel stuff, and doing my own stuff over and over again,
right?
And learning. Then I got and drawing, and looking at studying the Nicolaides book, The Natural Way to Draw.
That's right.
And that's what Shamus told me to do. So there are two major turning points that I traded in for almost a nervous breakdown. One is learning to sharpen my pencil and focus eyes, and the other is that book.
Right.
I still have it with me, and it is and it's a great book. It's that and the Preston Foster book, the cartoon book,
cartoon animation.
Yeah,
and then he did a sequel, How to Animate. Yeah. That was.
I keep forgetting we're not on. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that we're not on screen here.
That's all right. You can show me, and then I can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then I can tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
He's rushing over to the other side of the room here, and John is he's fidgeting around. He's trying to find this thing. That's it. Animation by Preston Blair. Learn how to draw. I
got this when I was about 10 years old, and this is the second version of it, because they removed all of the 19 all of the Bambi and Fantasia stuff and all of that. So and all of the great stuff they did, but what he was able to do is he still had the Red Hot Riding Hood.
That's right.
The dancing stuff. He changed it a little bit, but that's basically it.
I used to call him. I told you this before. We talked about a week ago, and I talked to him. I would go to school of visual arts, and then what Gil Moret and some of the other people like Howard Beckerman couldn't give me. Yeah. I called Preston Blair and asked him to explain some stuff to me. Yeah. And he was very, very nice. He lived in Westport, Connecticut at the time. He had Preston Blair Productions up there, and he did a lot of commercials up there, but he did some stuff for the Flintstones, which I haven't figured out what episodes he worked on. Yeah. But yeah, he was kept very busy up there, and he was very involved with the New York animation community. But he was in his own world up there in Westport. Right. Yeah, and did pretty well for himself.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing about it is that Connecticut was a real mecca for comic strip artists, because you had all of Walkers up there, all of the various syndicate a lot of them were up there living in that area in Connecticut.
Mort Walker was near. He was near Portchester, wasn't he?
I don't know. I mean, all I know is Connecticut was a place. It was a land of fantasy for me, because
right. We had cartoonists on Long Island too, but but it was kind of hard to find them. I mean, I knew the guy who did Little Jinx. And for Archie, he lived out here. He lived in Massapequa.
Okay.
And Joe Edwards.
Right. Well,
great artist. Yeah.
Most people lived around the New York area just because you had to deliver your packages.
Yeah. Into Manhattan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier because all the major syndicates were there.
Right.
They had at least an office that they would you could go and talk to the editors, or you could bring the material in.
Right.
And that's where you're printing. I mean that's where you could go and deliver the material, because you didn't want to trust it to the mail. No,
it wasn't like you could make a copy of it. Yeah, it wasn't like you could make a copy. There was no way of where would you go for that?
Yeah. That's so all of that. So it was not easy. You didn't have a Kinko's. You didn't have anything to make a reproduction of your stuff.
Right.
So
yeah, crazy.
So, anyway, so his delivery was that. Myron Waldman, I saw, he was the first animator I actually met in terms of, he came in and he had a Samsonite suitcase.
Okay.
And in it was big enough. I have one.
Right.
And I saw that and that taught me to carry your scenes in it. You needed something big enough to get paper and pencils and all of that sort of stuff, and yet indestructible. So I still have mine from 1974.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think they made stuff better back then than they do now, because things kind of fall apart now. But unless you're paying extra money to get something of some quality,
Right. Yeah.
So you went to work. Okay. So you were Culhane, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
you were basically a runner, so you weren't doing any drawings, were you? For him,
I was supposed to be taught doing some taught in betweens and stuff like that, and exposure sheets and things of that sort. I did that. Well, I tried, but he was expecting somebody with training that you didn't get yet. I mean, I had a 6-week thing.
Shamus was expecting somebody to be relatively seasoned, not a guy that only had like 6 weeks of. Yeah.
He was looking for somebody who at least was used to looking at a professional exposure sheet. The only sheets that I knew were my own sheets.
Right.
I knew how to. I was very familiar with it, but and then he would have me, he was looking for somebody with at least a year's worth of experience.
Right. Right. And you're coming in green. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still a shoot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sprout.
Yeah.
So anyway, after 2 weeks, I said, you need somebody much more experienced than I. So he agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I'll lay you off. And at the time, New York City was in a situation of Ford said, drop dead to New York. Mm-hmm. And so unemployment, they opened up unemployment. Instead of it just being 13 or 26 weeks, it was up to 52 weeks.
Wow.
So I was on unemployment for 52 weeks.
Oh, God.
And that was enough to pay my rent. Right. I lived on West 74th Street between Amsterdam and between Amsterdam Avenue and Columbus Avenue, West 74th Street.
Right.
Next, like a couple of blocks away from the Dakota.
Yes.
And so I lived there, and then did some freelance for some other guy who was being sponsored by some rich lady who was selling her gold, and she wanted a film to be made. So I had met him at Gil Moret's class, and so I started working with him. So between the two, I cobbled up enough money to be able to pay my rent and feed, do everything I needed to do for a year.
Right.
And so after that, I wound up at Danny Hunn's, at DNR Productions. I would visit them, showing my reel, and they're the ones who gave me the intro to go to New York Tech. They were looking for young people who wanted to work on this feature they were doing, and they needed bodies, and they would train. That's where I got my training.
Wow.
And that's where I met Chuck Harrington, Johnny Gentilella, Marty Terrace, Earl James, Wayne Boring, the Superman guy.
Right.
All of those people, they were working there, and they needed. I was the first in between, a first raw one that they hired on. The first day that I did, they would split us up. They hired a whole bunch of people, but the thing is that they started on a Monday, and it was a 4.5-hour round trip for me every day to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
I did that for 14 months.
Wow.
So I did that. So we and the first, so we would do some training in the morning, and then the afternoon it was in the Xerox room working cells, that other people, that some of the other artists were doing.
Right. Painting cells or just Xerox?
No, this was polishing cells. We were in this, we were Xeroxing cells.
I see. What were you working on at that time? Were you working on Tubby?
That was Tubby the Tuba.
Yeah, that was the experimental.
Tubby the Tuba that was going on, and just as a reference, it's the beginning and the ending of my career, because across campus is where Edmund Catmull and someone else, they were working on how to develop computer animation. That's why they were doing Tubby the Tuba, because they were looking to see what was the problems that that computers would have to circumvent or overcome to be able to do something like this.
Right. Wasn't it Louis Shore? Was the other one?
It was Dr. Alexander Shore.
Alexander Shore. Okay.
Yeah, and he owned the company. He was the president, but really the owner of the school of New York Tech.
Right.
And it was Shure Electronics that funded everything.
Wow. You weren't actually at New York Tech. You were at working out of another facility. It was like a schoolhouse or something campus. Like that. Oh, it was on.
It was. What was his name? Something house. What was it called?
It's all right. We don't need.
Well, it's kind of like it was. We did some stuff, and it was at.
We're going back almost 50. It's almost 50 years, right?
Yeah, I know. But that's what it's all about, Oh, Simonson House.
Oh, okay.
That's Simonson House. This was done the spring and summer of 1975 or so, and they did. They had done. They had taken pictures, films of us playing in the yard, and between breaks and lunchtime.
Oh wow!
And they pulled together something like this a couple of years ago.
Wow!
So Simonson House is where it was, but we were on the campus on the other side.
Right.
So
north of Northern Boulevard.
I don't remember. Well, what happened was that we would take everybody would join up in the morning at Penn Station, and get the train and go out there, and then because there were so many of us, they had to put a special bus to pick us up because they had the regular school bus there, but there were too many of us, so we had that bus to come pick us up at Old Westbury train station. Then take us to Simonson House.
Oh, wow.
And then there were about, in terms of the people who were coming out of New York, to get to the station, there had to have been about 12 or 15 of us.
Wow.
I mean, the staff itself got to the point, because a lot of people lived in Long Island. And but there's so many of us were coming in, and so that would be too much for them to get this extra load, and also have their own students get picked up.
Yeah, wow.
That's the only way to get there. From the train station.
It's crazy. It must have felt like you're coming out to the country.
Oh, it was coming out of the country. I'm coming from Bensonhurst, right? You don't know where you know where that is. Well, or Manhattan. Well, no, actually, by that time I had to move back
to Bensonhurst.
Folks, I had to give up my apartment, Manhattan, because I had to have a pilonidal cyst removed, and I couldn't sit.
Oh, okay.
And so I had that operation. It's like 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. And I could not do it by myself. So I had to move back. And it was after that, 6 months, after the operation and all that, and I'm able to sit and whatnot. 3 months later, I've got the job.
Wow.
I wind up being, at Tubby.
Wow. Pretty neat.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think how you would get to Old Westbury from Bensonhurst. You probably had to go up to the Long Island Railroad in Brooklyn.
I had to go from 18th Avenue on the West End line, the B train. To go, I went up to Penn Station.
Okay. Oh wow.
Get on the Long Island Railroad and go back, because there was no other way to do it.
There was no direct way.
That was the only. So I'm leaving here, and then going up to the train, and then go into the island, onto Manhattan Island, and then going straight across.
Yeah, it's almost like doing some anticipation before you go forward, because you had to go across the river to Manhattan and then take the train all the way out from there. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's what we did. And so the first day I'm there, I'm doing drawings and I'm doing the best I can. And so everybody is leaving their stuff and they're checking them. It's Chuck Harrington who's checking. He was the animation supervisor.
Right.
It was officially, Alexander Shaw was the director. He was given he was producing and he was directing in what he wanted to be done.
Right.
He knew nothing about sheets or anything of that sort. He didn't do any of that.
Wow.
So anyway, so Chuck is looking at everybody's drawings, and the most you could have done was maybe about 4 or 5 drawings, because you're doing it for the first time, the first day. You're trying to be as careful as possible.
Sure. You try not to get fired.
Right. and I think everybody's pretty much doing very similar drawings, head turns. Tubby's helmet was a very difficult thing to do.
Right.
Because it's a circular thing and he's going up like that.
Right.
So you have a scene where you've got it from a head shot where the head is conical and then it's got to lift up and go down.
Right.
Go to the other side. So he's doing this,
Right. So you gotta get that perspective.
Just as a description, it's really like you've got an open tin can and then you have to show it in rotation, from back to front.
Right.
And so that's what I was doing.
Wow.
So that was the thing. So I had to arc it.
Right.
And that's one of the first things you have to learn is how to arc your drawing.
Right.
And so I was doing that anyway. So, and that was the drawing. And those were the drawings. And I went, okay, I'm doing the best I can, and as quickly as I can, because they say we want to, see how well you're able to do this stuff. So anyway, so there's about 10 of six of us at this point,
right?
New recruits, and so we were supposed to spend half the day drawing, and then the other half working in the Xerox machine, learning how to Xerox and polish and to re-strip and repeg the drawings, by their system. Anyway, we have lunch. I'm sitting down, and a half hour later, Walt Kubiak, who is the only assistant there, well, he's kind of like the other, the second cleanup assistant. He comes running down and he says, "Chuck wants to see you." And I said, "What did they do?" He said, "Celestri, Chuck wants to see you." I said, "Okay." Remember, New York City animation was very rough and tumble.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody
People don't understand. Think Longshoreman. That's basically it.
Yeah.
It's very factory. It was not artiste. It was very factory and very gruff.
Right. Get it there or else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the pressure you were always on. So I'm thinking, shit, I hope I didn't, mess up on my first day already.
Right.
So I go up, and he said, and so Chuck says, did you do these drawings? And I said, yeah, what's wrong with them? He says, nothing. They're good. I don't want to ever see you down in the Xerox room ever again. You're drawing from this point on. Get in there, get to your desk.
Wow.
That was it.
Yeah.
From that point on.
Right.
So, and that's where I met, Johnny and Marty and all the other people, at there. And I was there for 14 months.
Wow.
Before going to Raggedy Ann and Andy with that experience of working on a feature film and going to Raggedy Ann and Andy and getting hired on by Michael Sporn that I'd already, spoken to on the phone several times.
Right.
Couldn't get hired anywhere, but that's primarily why I got hired.
That's a great thing about feature films or big productions like that, because all of a sudden they just need the talent. And so it's like, if you're showing some talent, and you could be green, but they'll bring you in, they'll train you because they just need you. They need you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that is really sink and swim, but you got to know something. I was too green for what Shamus Culhane needed. Right. He needed somebody who at least knew more vernacular than I did.
Right. They basically, whoever he hired had to hit the ground running. They had to really know. Yeah. Yeah. So it must have felt like a real. I mean, did you get a raise in salary going to Richard Williams on?
Yeah, what happened was that while I was there at New York Tech, it went union. Mm-hmm. And so by that time, I was a journeyman assistant.
Wow.
So by the time I was at, I had my union card and everything and I became a supervising assistant.
Wow.
I had my own crew.
Wow.
So I had maybe about 8 people at some point.
Cool.
5 to 8 people that were, I was keying the cleanups, and then somebody else was doing some breakdowns, and then it was on. So we kind of divvied up the things. So I would do keys, someone else, and then we'd split up the scenes, and then people would then hand it out to other to in-betweeners.
Wow. That must have felt good. Mm-hmm. To get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so from that point on, again, after within the first 14 months of being in the first 2 years of working in the industry, I'd been on 2 feature films.
Yeah, that's impressive. At that time, that was impressive.
Oh, people don't understand how rare working on features were. And out of New York.
Right.
No matter what the quality is, the fact is that you go and you do the work. It's like being vaudeville. You have to be on the stage. You have to do it. You have to get your reps in. You have to know, get your criticisms, and you have to be able to please somebody.
That's right.
With your work.
The only other animated feature film that came out of New York, maybe before Tubby, was Ralph's Fritz the Cat.
Well, yeah.
And that was the X-rated movie where I think Jim Tyre worked on it.
Yeah,
Jim Tyre.
Johnny Jett, Marty Terrace worked on it. All of the Fleischer, all of the Terry-Toon people that and the New Yorkers. Ralph just picked up everybody.
Yeah,
because he knew who he could work with.
Do you know where that was done? Was that done out of Manhattan, or?
Oh no, I have no idea. That's just before. I had already seen. I guess I'd seen. I really never saw most of Fritz the Cat because it had come and gone before I was really into it.
Right.
And it was Coonskin.
Yeah, and I think
I remember seeing that one.
Yeah, but I think those were done out of L.A. I think he moved to L.A.
Probably, yeah. But I know that Marty and I believe Marty and Johnny worked on those also. Because
I'm sure they did.
He was always using the same people that he could trust.
Right. Yeah, I think Cosmo Ancelotti was another one that he used, and he was backgrounds, I guess. Cosmo, right?
He did everything.
Yeah. But
Cosmo did anything.
Yeah, but that's a name that used to come up all the time because I worked for Ralph on the Mighty Mouse show that he did in the 80s. And that was, he would talk about him and he would talk about Johnny Gent and Jim Tyre especially. I love Jim Tyre.
Yes, yeah, Jim Tyre, yes.
Yeah, and I think Jim Tyre died like in the early 70s, so yeah.
But he was a madman. But his stuff was so great. He could handle stuff, but he was a guy that you could recognize his style immediately.
Well, I think at some point he got bored with the common assignments because, sometimes these animation assignments can be really meticulous and too exacting and they get boring, And I think with Jim Tyre used to do this wild, crazy animation that you were talking about. And, he basically was like the Ward Kimball of Terry-Toons. But it's almost like the guy's head exploded and he just did all this wild stuff. And it's fun. Yeah. It's when his stuff comes on the screen, it's just like all of a sudden it's like it goes from boring Terry-Toons straight animation to this wild, insane stuff that's really fun,
Yeah. It is because it's just allowing himself to do. That's the thing you don't have today.
Right. To be himself.
Yeah.
To be himself and really exploit. Is exploit the word I'm looking for? Exploit the medium or just have fun with the medium? We'll just say have fun with the medium.
Just have fun with the medium. Just enjoy it.
Yes.
That's a hard thing to get allowed to do, you know?
Right. Interesting. So you went over to Raggedy and Andy. So it it wasn't that much of a commute time because you were going into Manhattan for that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. After that was a lot easier.
Do you remember where the studio was there for Raggedy?
44th Street, 46th Street. It was in the Diamond District.
Oh, so it was basically where Famous Studios was.
I guess that's what it was. Yeah.
Famous was on 45th or 44th and 45th, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'm sure, but because it wasn't Richard Williams. Richard Williams had been hired on to do that,
right?
Because originally it was Shamus Culhane doing the development of Raggedy Ann and Andy.
Uh-huh.
And then Richard Williams took it over. I don't know what the reasonings were.
Right.
But he, as a director, he was there. And I think Howard Beckerman was in that same building.
Right. Yeah.
You know? And he had his own, he shared an office space, like a little cubicle, you know, it was, all of these offices are not very big. It's just standing room only.
That's right. Yeah, the biggest office space I saw was probably Beckerman had a pretty good size office space. But
I thought it was tiny.
It was tiny though, yeah. But but everybody else, like George Bakes,
there are walk-in closets in LA that are bigger.
I guess the precious office space in Manhattan. Yeah. But then you walk into it. Well, I guess like Phil Kimmelman had a decent size Xander's animation
he had about
parlor.
3 rooms.
Yeah, Xander's animation parlor was.
That was big.
Big, yeah. And that was on what 40? I want to say 43rd or.
They were all in that. They were all
41st
around Madison Avenue, within walking distance
of the ad agencies. Yeah,
ad agencies and things. Because that's how it was done.
Right. Yeah, you were close, and they could pop in at any time and see what the progress was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I know Rankin Bass was down on, I guess, East 30th, somewhere around there. Rankin Bass doing that, but they weren't doing any animation in the city. They were farming it all out.
It was all farming, all out there.
Yeah.
So, even at the time, McGill Moret was talking about, full animation wasn't being talked about in those circles in 1973, 74. He was talking about animatics,
right?
Things of that sort. Just being able to do basically what we call the what is it? Anyway, where you're doing just a storyboard, you're just doing camera zooms and you just cross dissolves and
and then maybe some movement of an arm or something like that. Just
there wasn't very much. The best animation, the most fun animation was the old Sesame Street spots that had been done,
right?
In the late '60s, early '70s.
That's right, and they were, and so all the New York studios got a piece of that, didn't they?
Yeah.
And sometimes they give like a young independent a shot to do something if you had a good idea. But that was interesting. The how long did Raggedy Ann and Andy last for you?
For me, it lasted until from about April or May. Yeah, April, May until December, until I left.
Right.
I mean, I was one of the last people there. But I left to go to Nelvana, to Canada, because Jerry Potterton had taken over from Richard Williams because Richard Williams was having problems delivering. And so Jerry Potterton, they were both friends, and that, I get that was a big blow up for years after that. Right. And so Jerry Potterton walked into, we were doing all kinds of golden time, for double and triple time for extra, because we needed to get this stuff done. So he walks into my office with I've got 2 other people with me, and we're just not chewing the fat. We're drawing. He walks in and he says, "Who wants to go to Canada?" And I turned to Sheldon Cohen, who is one of my in-betweeners. Right. And I thought Sheldon Cohen, here's the Sheldon Cohen who's a very famous, National Film Board artist now, of his record. But he was working he was one of my in-betweeners. And he was, from Montreal. Right. And he said, he says, so I turned to him. He says, are you going to go to Toronto? He says, I don't want to go to Toronto. What's there? No, nothing. So I just raised my hand. I'll say, I'll go. Right. And so that's how I got to Nelvana. Wow. I was there. I went there the follow. I mean, what happened is
so you were animating now. Were you?
I was still assisting.
Oh, okay. Okay, because you said you had an assistant, but...
I had an yes,
yeah.
I was a supervising assistant, and I had 3, 4, 5 other assistants underneath me to handle the rest of the work.
Right.
I was setting the drawing, like I would do every 5th or 6th drawing, keying up those, and then I'd have somebody else do the breakdowns, and then somebody else would be doing in-betweens, and that's how it was worked out. So I had an assistant, but
gotcha.
I had done 1 or 2 animated bits of animation that Richard Williams gave me on that. But what I had to bring to Nelvana was a 15-minute. I had my recommendations from Jerry Potterton, how I work, and then I had a reel that I'd done at SVA, which was of the wizard talking. It was a 10-15-second reel, which I had been doing. It was my first bit of lip sync, in which the character is a wizard. He opens up the screen, steps out, and starts explaining the concept of metamorphosis.
Right.
So there was like 5 and 10, 15, 20 seconds worth of acting of a character on stage and just, doing something. He had a cigar in his hand. He was working around with every stuff. So anyway, so that's what I had to bring. So I went, within, he called, Jerry calls up his friend, it's Clive Smith, set up a thing where I come up, they give me they give me the tickets, they send me the tickets, and when I pick it up, they bring me up. I show them the reel. The first thing they said after looking at it, the first 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and the whole thing, they turned to me and says, "Can you do 15 seconds a week of this? Can you do 15 feet?" I said, "Yeah." Of this? I said, "Yeah." "Okay, you're hired." So I'm replacing an animator, and I thought animators in Canada would be, 50 years old, 60. He broke his wrist, playing hockey.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, they make a tough old animators up there. I didn't know that, because there hadn't been any new animators in New York City in 20 years, as I said. It's not even just young blood. They had never raised anybody up from the assistant thing, because the guys knew who would work, and there was only so much work, and they knew who to trust for their assistant work,
and
the in-betweening, and that was it. And that was survival. People, there was only so much to eat. And they made sure that but the problem is that they started to lose people. As they're aging, they're going.
They're either retiring or they're just they're puttering out. They're dying.
I mean, the animators, the assistants were pretty much in their late 30s, early 40s. The animators were in their 50s and 60s
and 70s. Some of them
70s. Yeah. So that's what was going on. So I figured it was the same thing in Canada. No, it was guys younger than me. He was Robin Budd, who he was maybe 2 years out of Sheridan, which is the only Sheridan College and Cal Arts. Those are the only 2 full-time animation
schools.
Schools. So I'm replacing him. So I'm coming in with 2 years of feature experience. And that is the first working on A Cosmic Christmas is the first actual animation. So in 2 years, I go from not having worked to animating. So
that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like once you got into it, it happened to me too. It was like I'm puttering around New York. I'm working on these things. I'm getting fired because, you work for a week and then it's like, yeah, we don't need you anymore or whatever. You're doing some assistant work or whatever. And then, people are just turning it down left and right. And then finally you just kind of hook into something.
Yeah.
And then it's like now people are starting to call you and it's just one thing leads to another, and you find yourself moving around at different places, and now it's not a problem. Now it's
But that's what New York animation is. I mean, I don't know what the other one, what California is,
right,
was at that time, because it was still the same sort of thing that I found, because I went between. I did 2 stints in Toronto. The first one was from January of 77 through the end of March of 77, Cosmic Christmas.
Right.
I went then to California, where I had already a letter of employment from Friz Freleng.
Right.
He, and so because he had been doing the previous summer, he was in New York, and he was scouting talent, and he knew that Raggedy Ann and Andy, there was a lot of young talent, and he thought that he would need more talent than what they had in California to sign up and to do their shows. So I got a letter of employment offering me as an animator, if I was ever in California, to come to work for him.
Right. That's pretty sweet. Yeah.
That is. So I took that, and I called up the production man. I was finished with Nelvana, and I called up California. It was the production manager, and he said, and I said, I have a letter from Frio for employment. He says, really? I said, yes. Well, I'm not sure about it. I didn't hire you. I said, no, it was Friz.
Right.
And he says, right. Okay. He calls him and says, okay, if you show up here, we'll look at it. So
boy, that's a word of encouragement.
Yeah. Well, I did was I took with me, because again, there's no reels.
Right.
You don't have reels.
No.
Yeah. So what I did was I had a month. I took a month off, all of April, and there was nothing to do until May. So I was in California, in Brooklyn. I'm doing 2 scenes, and I'm of a clown bouncing a basketball, running around in circles.
Right.
Doing that.
Okay.
And then picking it up and tossing it around, and did another character.
Right.
So I did those 2 scenes. If you really could flip it through, brought those with me, and that's how I got hired onto Friz at Tubby Freleng. Now, they were so used to just working with their own people, they didn't know where to put with me.
Right.
And so then, and then another director came. But that time, you had Cherry Chinnicky, you had Bob McKinson.
Had passed away, right? Yeah.
That summer is when he passed away.
Right.
And
of 77.
Huh?
1977. Yeah, he passed away at lunch.
Yes,
they went out to
right there in soup.
Yeah, he collapsed.
That was everybody. It was terrible. I mean, people were just in shock. Nobody could do anything after that. I mean, it was people were just, people were crying. I mean, it was just terrible.
Well, he'd been there.
He was put there on Friz's. He was a director at Warner's, but he was part of Friz's crew since like the early 40s.
That's right. No, they were all tight. They were going out to lunch every day. They were, they all, even the assistants, the story people all worked with.
They all worked
together.
Yeah. There were people. I've seen pictures of Sid Marcus, who was there. He was doing Crazy Cat cartoons in 1910. 1919. There's a picture with little Jimmy Culhane, that's why James Culhane is named. Not Shamus. It's Jim. It was Jimmy Culhane, and Sid Marcus is next to him.
Right.
I mean, they're all together. It's history.
It's a tight-knit community. I mean, even today it's very tight, but back then it was just really tight because it was a handful of people everywhere.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah. Even if you didn't work for somebody, it was like, because you would see each other. You'd see people at these meetings, they would have the union meetings and they would have events and stuff, and these people would be invited. They were Really tight.
Everybody. Well, because there's no TV. I mean, it's radio, but they're also young. People forget when animation really got going. Everybody was young.
Yeah, that's right.
They were all the ones, they were all the crazies. And then after a while, it ages.
Yeah.
And then it keeps aging and then aging and aging. And then until the 70s, there were hardly anybody there. But in New York, you had a lot of people where there were a lot of people who wanted to get into it. People, didn't think of it the same way as people getting into the animation industry back then in the 1930s. They were looking for a job. It was the Depression.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
a lot of the people who came into the business at the time, they didn't go to college. They might have gone to art school, maybe not even, and just happened to draw and would join the studio at 17 years old or 18 years old. Like Fred Moore, I think his portfolio was on butcher paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Milt Kahl was the first person who actually brought in a portfolio. I think it was like 1935 or 1934 when he did that.
Yeah. He was a commercial artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because he was already doing that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So he came in and it was crazy. It was a crazy time, but they would see the potential in you and they would hire you and they would train you.
Yes, and that was Disney. Yeah. Disney would do that. He was the first one to bringing a training program.
Right. Actually, put people in art school and
Sure not. Well, that's Art Babbitt doing his after work, art classes.
Right.
Out of he and Bill Tytler, they roomed together. They were best pals. Mm-hmm. They roomed together, brought their dates home with them. And they were making a lot of money, a ton of money for that time period. I mean, 1930s, and he's making $300 a week.
Yeah, doesn't sound like much today, but it was a lot of money back then.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was a lot of money.
Yeah, they were talking about like a dinner, like if you had a fancy dinner, it'd be like $1, $1 maybe, Pretty wild.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but the New York scene was very different. We were all hustling. We're all about the same ages. Anywhere between 23 to about 25, 26.
Yeah.
All trying to get something.
Sure.
Get it into the door any way you can.
Right. Yeah. Crazy. I mean, I was there. I was there trying to do that. It wasn't until I reached out to LA to those studios that I actually got some response. Yeah. So pretty crazy. Nelvana, so you went to work for Frizz. How long were you at DePatie Freeling?
I was there from about May until the middle of October.
Oh, so, okay. So 9 months, 8 months?
I was there for a full season.
Right.
It's a May, June, July, August, September, halfway. So, almost 6 months.
Right.
5.5 months. But the reason I left is because, in 1977, it's still part of the thing of you get work for 6 months in TV, and then that was it.
That's
there was no big to do. There was maybe if you got into a special, that would be one thing, but it still was maybe 3 months production,
right?
At the most. So what happened was that this is about in June or July. I can't remember what is June or July. I get a letter. I get a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I get called to the office or to the you're allowed access to it. People don't remember that you didn't have a phone. You had no access to a phone in an office unless you were a supervisor.
Right. You'd have to go in the hallway or something.
I was in a hallway, so I got called to whatever the common phone was, and the switchboard would put me in. They says, John Celestri, you're called to the phone.
Right.
And I went, who would call me? So I call it. It was Michael Hirsch, who was one of the three principals of Nelvana. Right. He was in L.A. He was calling me to see if I wanted to come back to work there at Nelvana on their feature Rock and Rule.
Wow.
They were doing a feature film. They wanted to do the Devil and Daniel Mouse, and they wanted to do a whole bunch of half-hour shows.
Right.
They had sold the contract to Viacom, mm-hmm. and they were now Viacom's animation arm.
Wow.
So we were doing half-hour specials, holiday specials.
Right.
So the first one was Cosmic Christmas.
Right.
Cosmic Christmas, and a Cosmic Christmas is the film that got us the Star Wars holiday special gig.
Wow.
Where I animated Boba Fett.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I wound up at Nelvana in at the end of at the beginning of November.
Okay.
So in that, so we're now into that realm of. I started in March of '75,
mm-hmm.
and so 2 years later, I'm traveling around in Canada, right. working on those shows.
What position did you take when you came back? Did they give you like a supervising animator position, or was it just
at Nelvana?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a senior animator.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, I was a senior animator. I mean, I was the only one. They hired me because I'm the only one with 2 years of experience for 2 feature films under my belt, and there were no Canadians who had that. So
right.
Landed immigrant and work visas were no problem because they couldn't there was no Canadian who could do it.
There's nobody who can match you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty neat.
So that's what you do. Is you gather whatever experience you can,
mm-hmm.
and become, somebody that's necessary.
That's right.
But the thing is, it's different now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make what you do different from everybody else, because the position, unless you're doing finance or something along there, special knowledge really isn't very special anymore, because back then, there was a lost talent, that things hadn't been developed.
Right.
People had forgotten how to do things, and
even the Disney people.
Mm-hmm.
Disney people, they were forgetting stuff.
Yeah.
So they were like, "How'd you do this effect in Bambi?" It's like, I don't know. It was like lost.
We just did it. We just, that we experimented, and that was it. I mean, some people wrote down all that stuff. I mean,
right.
I think the special effects department, they did write down some stuff, but you know what? I don't know if it's there anymore.
Right.
Because you have to have a reverence for knowledge,
mm-hmm.
and to say, I'm not going to throw out this stuff. I'm going to keep this knowledge.
Right.
And you have to be able to do that.
Some people just kind of took it to their grave, like Up iWorks.
Yeah.
You had Up iWorks that developed all these different film processes, all these different ways of doing things for film, and then he passes away, and it's like, well, he might have wrote it down, but we don't know where it is, and
yeah.
He died in 1971. He took,
the green screen effect. I mean,
Right.
But people have been doing that sort of stuff for years. They did MGM.
Yep.
But again, I think it was a thing of doing a cartoon on top of live action is one thing.
Right.
Because you can do that. You can match it.
Yeah.
You cell by cell. You could do that. Taking a green screen, a live person, and putting it within a cartoon environment is a very different
thing. Yeah.
Today it's nothing. There's no magic to it at all.
No, it's computer technology, which is basically doing it for you. You know, I mean, I'm probably making it too simple, but it's a lot easier to do it today than back then.
You're right. It's taking. Okay, let's put it this way. It's like taking the environment of doing paintings, okay, on glass, and superimpose it on a live situation, and then running a camera in front of it. You know,
see the way I know the way they used to do it back in the day, with the cells, you know, to superimpose onto a live action thing. And it was just basically they would take the same cells, and I guess they would paint them on the back black and then backlight them. And so they would create the matte. They would create the matte for the image, and then basically that would cut out the live action so that you couldn't see through the character.
Well, when you're doing a cell, it's opaque no matter what you do.
Right.
Okay. You know what you're doing is, when Gene Kelly is dancing, you know, with
Jerry Mouse.
Okay. Well, he's dancing. He's imagining what the character is going to do, because a lot of that dancing stuff is rotoscoped off of Gene Kelly.
Right.
There's a lot of that stuff. So he's doing it first, and he can understand what he did. There was another film before that,
right?
You know that had something similar to that. But anyway, he.
I know what film you're talking about. It wasn't done at MGM. It was done, I think, at either RKO or Warner's. I think. Oh God, I can't think of the name of the film, but it was his shadow. I think it was supposed to be he's dancing with his shadow. He's doing
whatever the case is. He's doing some stuff, and anyway, there is some. It had been done several different times, but the thing about it is, all cells were opaque because you couldn't see the background behind it. So what you're acetated. You know, you ink it on top's end with a quill pen. Then you flip it over, and then you paint it behind that, and that goes straight on the actual
background.
It's bipacked.
Yes, bipacked. That's right.
Because basically what you have is an alpha channel. You know, you have around an alpha channel, which is what the cell is.
Right. Exactly.
It's clear acetate.
Yeah. So basically, you're blacking out. You're blacking out. Everything that's underneath that image.
As soon as you put it on top of the rest of it, as long as you've got eye focus, again, he knows what to do, and he's doing his timing. The animation is working to the live action character, and so you shoot it, the timing exactly right, and and then you bypack it.
Right. I don't think they're doing too much bypacking today.
No, they don't. It was an expensive thing, especially when you're talking about Technicolor.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to tell you, I was a big fan of all that Nelvana stuff. It was so different from everything else. So I saw Cosmic Christmas and Take Me Up to the Ball Game, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I think they put it out on tape. About 4 or 5 of them. They put them out on tape.
Yeah, there were grand total of 5.
Yeah,
there was Cosmic Christmas, Devil and Daniel Mouse, Romeo and Juliet, Intergalactic Thanksgiving.
Yes, I saw that too.
Or Please Do Not Eat the Planet, and then Easter Fever.
Easter Fever was pretty good. Easter Fever, yeah. That's with Garrett Morris. I remember directing, Garrett, and Catherine O'Hare. Right.
They were going back and forth with each other.
Right.
On that, so instead of having reading their the lines separately, I had them in front of the same the mic,
right,
and they were just playing off of each other. I mean, Second City, Saturday Night Live, they knew how to play off of each other.
Right.
Didn't have to, and I would get a more natural reaction.
Sure.
that way.
They used a lot of people for Second City for these specials, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We used a lot of. Catherine O'Hare was always there.
Right.
We always had, but we always had somebody special. John Sebastian did our music.
Right.
For Loving Spoonfuls. He did it for Devil and Daniel Mouse all the way through Easter Fever. And then it was Rick Danko of the band who did Take Me Up to the Ball Game.
Right. Wow.
You do that.
Wow. So, pretty neat.
Yeah.
And had some pretty good talent working on that thing. Those specials.
We had. Yeah, we did all the.
Were they all full? They were all full animation, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
We were very full, in comparison to all the other shows. That's what knocked us out of it knocked us out of the ballpark. We knocked it out that way because we were trying different things. It was a very much of there was a North American feel, but there was also a very European feel to it.
Yes.
A combination of young Turk feeling of it's not Disney, it's not Warner Brothers because we haven't been in that road. The week prior to me getting the phone call from Michael Hirsch about coming back to Nelvana, I had contacted Disney to see if there was an opening, if I could get into their program.
Right.
The training program. Afterwards, I've got 2 years of experience, 2 feature films under my belt.
Right.
I'm working at the Patty Freeling as an animator, as a journeyman animator. Right. I said, "Is it possible?" And he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 27." He says, "Well, I'm sorry, with your experience and your age, you're too old for us to mold." And so,
do you remember who you talked to there? Was it Duckwald? Don Duckwald?
Somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and that was the best thing for me because I can continue to mold my own stuff.
Right.
I didn't have to try and emulate what Carl was doing or anything like that. I could be influenced, but I didn't have to try and do that.
Right.
So now it was fortuitous that I didn't get it. Yeah. And so, sometimes, you think that you're not going to do anything and it's a bad situation, but you know what? If the door is slamming shut to you, then, it depends on what you're willing to do to get to your goal.
Right.
Be creative about it. You have more chances of being creative now than you could back then because there were only so many opportunities. Everybody's shouting. Every generation deals with the same level of noise, right? In comparison to what the previous generation had to do. I mean, people thought the telephone was a terrible thing to have in your house. Right. It was going to disrupt you at least 2 or 3 times a day. Yeah. By that noise. Right. The TV set was a terrible thing for an hour or 2 hours because that's going to disrupt you. Right. Today, I don't know how much more time you have to be disrupted because you are.
Yeah, exactly. I want to tell you a quick story. Chuck Jones went to work for Disney back in the 50s, I guess when Warner's laid off. Yeah. Early, all of a sudden they shut everything down because 3D was the thing. Right. And they figured, we're going to be doing 3D films. We're not going to be doing any cartoons anymore. So you guys are out. Right. And so Chuck Jones went to work for Disney. He called up he called up the studio and they hired him. And he ended up working with Ward Kimball. I think they were working on Lady and the Tramp. They were working on coming up with stuff. And he ended up leaving after, I don't know if it was 3 or 6 months. Warner Brothers reopened and he ended up going back. Right. And thank God he did, because he just would have been another cog in the machine over there. I mean, I loved what Disney did. I love Lady and the Tramp. I love all that stuff. But even Disney kind of held Ward Kimball down, who was an amazing director. He's a great, amazing animator. And he ended up moving out of features into television, and he did some great television stuff. You know, they had decent budgets, but Chuck ended up going back to Warner's and doing some really wonderful films there. You know, they're 6 minutes, but they're masterpieces. So, you know, the one thing I heard about Disney at the time was the fact that they just basically, it took forever to get anything done. Everything was going through Walt. So, you know, Walt was making decisions on stuff, but sometimes the stuff just couldn't get through, you know, for a long time. And, you know, and if you're ultra creative, if you're, you know, you have all this, you know, we're talking about energy before, but if you have all this energy, it's kind of like you're losing some of that. Because somebody's holding you down. They're holding you at your feet, and this is what we want you to do. So, you know, Disney is not the end all.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I learned that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, they did
It's the second time I was turned down. The first time was like 4 years earlier in 1972 when I applied.
Right.
You know, I sent them, you know, my reel from SVA.
Right.
And they said, well, you have it has a good sense of entertainment, but you don't draw well enough.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, you don't draw well enough. You got too much experience. Well, there you go.
Yeah, there's always some excuse, right?
Yeah, there's always some. I just want to say that all of this stuff really has lent me to where I am now, where there's no animation for me to do. There's nothing. There hasn't been anything for me to do for 20 some odd years. Right. Really. Mm-hmm. So working my comic books and things of that sort allows me to be creative, to do stuff that you know. I put everything I can into my comic books, and then I'm doing little videos of the comic books themselves, using just doing my putting like story reels.
That's the fist fire or fire fist angel. Yeah. How many episodes have you done so far on that?
Well, so far I've done three 3-minute episodes. It's all sound and whatnot, and I'm working on the fourth one. But basically, it's I've got a comic book series called Bloodwing, and I'm calling it Bloodwing Fire Fist Angel, and it's very much like a cross between Barbarella and Popeye, you know, with that kind of sensitivity.
Right.
It's about an angel who's it becomes the pawn in a game between Satan, God, and Satan. It's the Book of Job, basically, but with an angel. So anyway, it's on YouTube as Fire Fist Angel.
Or you can look it up by your name, John Celestri.
John Celestri. You can see it on there. And then you could find also the comic book. I have my website where I actually print the comic book. We're at on episode on the third book of it. So there's about 120 pages in the story so far. Wow. And so there's a lot going on. It's kind of an episodic graphic novel series that I'm doing.
Very cool.
So that's what I'm doing there. So it's up there, and you can find.
What's your website? What's your website address?
JohnCelestriComics.square.site.
Okay.
Yeah, JohnCelestriComics.square.site. Type in John Celestri Comics.
Do a search.
It'll come right there.
It'll pop up, or on YouTube as John Celestri. It will come right up. Yeah.
If you type my name in Google, you'll see a lot of me. I'm sure we will. Yeah. It's there. It's been going on for quite a while. So very cool. But anyway, this is fun. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about Disney, we talked about Fleischer, we talked about Famous Studios, we talked about your career going up to Nelvana. Yeah. And we'll have to do this again. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. I know there was a lot of meat here. So yeah. Oh yeah, and there's a lot of fish in the terminal warehouse building where Nelvana was in a fish warehouse. No. So Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there's stories for that. Okay. So.
Okay. We're gonna save the rest for later. Next time we come back, we'll be talking about Rock and Rule.
Yes.
Which I saw. I think UA United Artists distributed it.
For a week.
Yeah, for a week. But it ended up
basically it was dead. It was they didn't want it.
I saw it I saw it there, and then I saw it over at I think it was at HBO. Maybe ran it.
Yeah.
Rock and Rule. Yeah. Okay.
It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show of animation.
Right. It's wonderful. It was really fun. Lou Reed. Lou Reed was
Lou Reed, Iggy Pop.
Yeah.
Deborah Harry, Earth, Wind and Fire, Cheap Trick.
Wow. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's 1980s. That's 1979, 1980 music.
Yeah. Wow.
So
pretty cool. Well, we'll talk about when we talk to you again, we'll talk about all that stuff. And thank you. Thank you, John. Take care.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Well, thank you, Mr. John Celestri, for coming on here and allowing us to interview you. Maybe we'll have John back in the near future to talk about some of his other projects. Well, John Celestri has this book out, and it's about the Nelvana Christmas special that they did in the late 70s. It's called the Star Wars Christmas Special. Actually features a character you might be familiar with. It's Boba Fett. So he worked on that character. But anyway, he compiled the script and drawings and models, put it into a nice, tidy little package. He's selling it on his website, and you can purchase it there. So it's johncelestricomics.square.site. Once again, you can go to johncelestricomics.square.site, and you can pick up his book and other items directly from John. So there you go. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for all the love you've been giving us here at the Cartoonerific podcast. It's quite wonderful. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much. You keep listening. We'll keep delivering. And hopefully the shows will keep getting better. And that's my hope. And if you have any comments at all, please send them to me, Brian at cartoonerific.com, and I will respond. So please do that. Anyway, if you really like what you're listening to, please subscribe. Go to your favorite service that you get the podcast from and click the subscribe button. You'll always be notified of brand new podcasts as they're uploaded. Anyway, in the weeks ahead, we have Disney historians Jim Fanning and Didier Guez. They'll be on here. So please stay tuned for that. Anyway, I want you all to have a great day. I want you to have an excellent week. And thank you all again for tuning in.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.